So the iPhone 14 has actually been out for about a month now, and I didn't even make this specific comparison. The iPhone 14 versus the 13 versus the 12 versus the 11 versus the 10R. And what's very, very interesting about this specific comparison, and I've already done individual comparisons between all these iPhones. So I've done 14 versus 13, the 13 versus the 10R, 11 versus 12. I've already done all these. But when you look at them all side by side, it's very interesting to see one, the similarities, but two, what Apple's, budget tier lineup that they kind of did a budget tier phone for, how it's evolved over time, and how, at one point it was a really decent phone, and now it's kind of like a weirder option out there. So starting off with the iPhone 10R back in 2018, this was actually the first time we saw Apple make some sort of phone like this. Before they had obviously like the iPhone 8s, the iPhone 7s, but Apple didn't make like a specialized like mid-tier phone that was more expensive than their SEs, and it was still kind of an expensive phone to be honest, because this was the only sub $1,000 phone in 2018 that was not an iPhone SE lineup. So this was like a phone that was made for Apple in 2018. Now obviously I think they were still selling the 8 Plus and stuff, but back in 2018 with its IPS panel, with its notch, I thought it wasn't a good deal when it first came out, but since then, I think it's evolved into a really decent phone. But then the year after, right? So this one was 749 when it first came out. And then a year after, we got the iPhone 11. This was a very, very good choice from Apple. And this is easily one of my favorite phones ever made. I talk about it a lot to this day because it was such an important iPhone, and it still is a very important iPhone. So some key things Apple did, for one, they decreased the starting price tag. This iPhone was $699 when it first came out. Compare that to the 14, which is now $799, actually $829 if you think about it. This one was substantially cheaper than that phone. When compared to the iPhone 10R, it may not have been a big screen update, but we got a dual camera setup on the back. That in and of itself was a really big upgrade. And even compared to the iPhone 14, we still have a dual camera setup on this phone. So they haven't really evolved there. We also got, and this is the bigger thing, bigger size battery, which is nice, but we also got the same internals for the most part when compared to the iPhone 11 Pro and iPhone 11 Pro Max. So I want you to remember that. When compared to the $1,000 phone and the $1,099 phone at that time, this $699 phone had the same chipset, which was the A13 Bionic, and it also had the same exact amount of RAM. So when you think about those things, this phone actually was somewhat of a faster phone than the iPhone, 11 Pro and 11 Pro Max. There were less pixels to push on this display. So that was something else that kind of stood out to me that was really, really crazy on this specific phone. Then the year after, we got the iPhone 12. Now, I wasn't really a fan of this phone when it first came out. I think I've kind of evolved and it's kind of gotten better. But there were two things that Apple kind of did here that I was not a fan of. For one, they did increase the starting price tag. This one was $699. This thing was $799, $829 technically if you think about it. So this is when Apple actually went ahead and increased the price tag. But then what Apple ended up doing, they did actually decrease the size of the battery from the iPhone 11 to the iPhone 12. That was another thing that I was not a fan of at all, and they didn't really do anything crazy. Like they put the OLED display on here, which was nice. They gave us flat size and kind of made it look a little bit better overall. But other than that, I mean, it was still kind of the same thing. Like they gave us 5G on this phone, but I don't think it warranted at like $100 and something increase in price tag. So I was not a fan of it. But I think since then it's gone down in price tag. It's very available in the used market, and I do think the battery life has gotten better on this phone too over time. So that's something that where this phone kind of has gotten better there. The iPhone 13, easily one of my favorite iPhones still to this day. I still use my 13 Pro right now, even though I have the 14 Pro. And this iPhone in and of itself was a really big upgrade, I would say, from the 12 and from the 11 and from all the other iPhones too. This one brought that Apple A15 Bionic chip, which is still inside the iPhone 14. We didn't get a RAM increase. I don't even think the speed increase was that big, but Apple fixed a few things. One, they fixed the battery degradation problem that I was having on my iPhone 12s. That is no longer here. But also, the iPhone 13 had a bigger size battery and a much more optimized chipset on this phone. Like the battery life on the iPhone 13 at that time was substantially better than what I was getting on all my other iPhones. So I was getting a very good experience from the iPhone 13 just from that standpoint alone. Now this does also include this, price increase. I was not a fan of the price increase, but now that did stem from the iPhone 12. So when we compare $699 here to $799 here, I do think the iPhone 11 was more impactful overall, but still, this phone for being that price tag and for giving you what it got you basically was really awesome. And now with the iPhone 14, probably one of the smallest upgrades I would say overall. It really isn't that big of an upgrade coming from the iPhone 13. It seems like every single year it kind of got from the iPhone 11 to the from the 10R to the 11, big upgrade. From the 11 to the 12, not really a big upgrade, but it kind of was. The iPhone 12 to the 13, I think, was a pretty big upgrade. And now from the 12 to the 14, also, I think it's a pretty small upgrade for sure, which again is kind of sad. So with this phone, you are getting the same type of display as the 13. It's a little bit brighter, which is nice. You're getting the same type of build quality. You're getting the same dual camera setup. It's a better camera setup. You're getting more features and everything, but it's the same. Like, there's really nothing else crazy with it. On top of that, really the performance is the crazy thing. The iPhone 13 from the iPhone 14 has the same exact chipset inside. That is crazy. This is the first time Apple's ever done this in their whole entire cheaper phone lineup. They haven't done this before. They gave us the same chipset on the iPhone 14 a year later than the iPhone 13. I think this one is a little bit faster, but still it's not that big of a deal. You are getting more RAM here, which I think Apple should have highlighted. You're getting 2 more gigabytes of RAM here than the iPhone 13. So we're pretty much matching the 13 Pro in terms of chipset and in terms of RAM. So that should have been something Apple had noted, but they never did. They didn't note it at all. But I will say, when looking back, when we look at the 2018 phone right here with the 10R, I think this was a pretty big upgrade. When you look at them individually, if you don't look at them year by year, but if you look at them kind of from 2018 to 2022, I think this is a pretty big upgrade. You can see we're getting better battery life, better display, better cameras, better build quality, I would say, flat sides. You're definitely getting a better phone from the iPhone 10R to the iPhone, 14. But then we start looking at something like the iPhone 11 here. And although you are still getting a better phone, what's really crazy is the differences are starting to kind of come similar. I mean, you're getting dual camera setups on both. Again, same type of display, different displays, but same size and everything. The performance is obviously better here. The battery life is better here, but it starts to become less and less noticeable, which might be obvious for some people. But if you compare the iPhone 10R to the iPhone 11, that was a monstrous update. When you compare the iPhone 12 to the iPhone 14, that's not even that big of an update, and this was 1 year. This is 2 years between these two, and it's still not that big of an update. Then we look at something like the iPhone 12, and I mean, there's very little differences here. I mean, to be honest, yes, bigger, brighter display, not bigger display, brighter display, faster performance, probably, but it's just not even that big of a difference. You're getting better battery life here, maybe a longer lasting phone, but there's not as many differences here. And that's kind of what's starting to happen. When we look at, again, we got to look back at these two phones, big difference here. Not that big of a difference, bigger difference here. Between the iPhone 13 and the iPhone 14, there is very, very little differences here. If you're somebody who has an iPhone 13, I would not recommend going up to an iPhone 14 at all. I would recommend keeping your iPhone 14 for the time being. There's really not too many reasons why a 13 owner should go to the 14. Maybe the only thing I can even slightly think of is with the cameras. You're getting maybe a slightly better camera on the iPhone 14. But even then, if you look at them, I mean, same size, same kind of everything. You're definitely getting a better phone, I would say, on the iPhone 14. But I will tell you, to kind of summarize this whole entire video, I feel like Apple could have done a little bit of a better job between all these phones. When I look at the iPhone 14, I don't think it's a bad phone. I just think it's really overpriced for what you're getting. Starting from the 10R, we had $749, $699, $799, $799, $799. I feel like personally Apple needed to give us a little bit more for our money at that point, and I think the iPhone 11 was the best one out of all these, or the most impactful. Obviously, the iPhone 14 is the most important one now. It's the one that's available. But I do think when we look at all these phones, we are starting to see Apple kind of hit a wall. There's just so many similarities between all these phones, and I think sooner than later, I mean, most people will probably end up keeping their iPhone 12 and not upgrading to the next phone. And I think it's kind of hurting Apple because they're not even upgrading to the Pros. They're just going to keep their phone for as long as possible. So I feel like Apple could do a little bit of a better job there, but I guess we're going to see what happens in the future. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.